Charleston mornings were supposed to be beautiful sunlight scattering across the pastel facades on East Bay Street, the church bells carrying through the narrow lanes, but mine always began the same way, with Celine's footsteps echoing through my front hall. She never knocked. The Whitcombs owned too much of this city to recognize the boundaries of a closed door. I was at the kitchen table, reviewing invoices for a regional client, when she appeared, her perfume arriving seconds before she did. "Isolde," she said with a sigh, glancing at my laptop as though spreadsheets were proof of my personal failures. "A woman your age should be preparing a nursery, not tax filings." I had stopped explaining long ago. Years of fertility appointments, whispered prayers, nights of silence had left me with no appetite for her judgment. But Celine's voice filled every room, gilded with Charleston refinement and sharpened by decades of entitlement. She still carried herself like the reigning queen of a society gala, though her throne was nothing more than the family's shipping firm and the fading echoes of its influence. I stood, stacking my files with a deliberate calm. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Please lock up when you leave." She ignored me, circling the kitchen like it was her domain. 8 years, Isolde. 8 years, and still no air. "Do you even try anymore?" The words slid under my skin, the same refrain repeated until it became a chant. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Upstairs, I heard Corbin's heavy steps. He would come down, offer his mother a tight smile, and let her poison settle into the walls. That was the rhythm of my days, her intrusion, his silence, and my slow erasure. And then the receipts began to appear. It started quietly, the way most unravelings do. Corbin came home late one Thursday night, muttering something about a client dinner near Broad Street. His tie hung loose, his hair slightly mussed, and he avoided my eyes as he set his briefcase by the door. I wanted to believe him. For a moment, I even did. But then the nights stacked one on top of the other Tuesdays, then Fridays, then nearly every evening, and the excuses blurred together like a rehearsed script. One Saturday morning, I found an envelope on the counter, addressed to him but opened. Inside was a credit statement with charges I couldn't ignore: a silk robe from a boutique on King Street, a platinum membership at a spa I'd never stepped foot in, dinners at restaurants where he had never taken me. My name wasn't on the account, but our home address was printed in bold at the top. I slipped the statement into a drawer and told myself I'd imagined the tightness in my chest. But the next week, while sorting through the kitchen trash, I saw shredded receipts that didn't match the life we lived together. I gathered the pieces, taped them back into place, and stared at the truth spelled out in ink jewelry, hotel stays, champagne. Then there was the perfume. Not mine. Never mine. I hadn't worn perfume in months, yet his shirts smelled faintly of jasmine, a sweetness that didn't belong in our home. I folded them for the laundry with shaking hands, the scent clinging like accusation. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I bought a small notebook and began to document. Photos of receipts, notes on his mileage, copies of the bank statements. Evidence, I told myself. A lifeline. If the time came when denial could no longer shield me. I never spoke of it to anyone, not even to my father, who would have seen through me in a heartbeat. I carried the weight alone, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer hold. That moment arrived with a call in the night. The phone rang at 2 a.m, its shrill sound tearing through the dark. For a moment, I thought it was a dream, until I saw Corbin's phone vibrating on his nightstand. He wasn't beside me. He hadn't been home at all. My hand shook as I answered. A woman's voice, high and unsteady, spilled through the line. "Are you Corbin's wife?" He collapsed. At the hotel downtown. They're taking him to Roper Hospital. His heart, he's critical. The line went dead before I could form words. I pulled on jeans and a sweater over my nightclothes, keys rattling in my hand as I stumbled to the car. The streets of Charleston blurred beneath the glow of the lamps. empty and endless, the silence broken only by the pounding of my own heart. At the hospital, the air smelled of bleach and something colder. I gave his name at the desk, barely able to breathe when the nurse pointed me toward the ICU wing. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, fluorescent lights buzzing above me. I forced my steps forward, bracing myself for what I might find. Then I saw her. A young woman stood outside the ICU doors, tall, with smooth blonde hair that caught the sterile light. Her black dress was sleek, her heels too fine for the hour, and her mascara had bled into dark streaks across her face. She clutched a designer handbag as if it were the only thing holding her upright. Her eyes found mine and widened. She straightened, wiped at her face, and whispered, "You must be Isolde." I froze, every part of me going cold. "Who are you?" She swallowed, voice trembling but sure enough to cut through the air. "I'm Harper Vale, Corbin's fiancée, and I'm pregnant with his child." The words hollowed me out, leaving nothing but the echo of my own breath in the sterile hall. Behind the doors, machines beeped steadily, as if reminding me that his heart still beat, even as mine faltered, and then Celine's perfume filled the air. The first sign of Celine's arrival was the scent floral, sharp and suffocating, rolling down the ICU corridor before she even appeared. Harper stiffened, then lowered her head as though bracing for judgment, but judgment never came. Celine swept past me without acknowledgement, her heels clicking against the linoleum, her pearl necklace catching the cold light. When her eyes landed on Harper, she stopped, studied her with a sharpness that felt surgical, and then, to my shock, smiled. "You must be Harper," she said softly, her voice lined with triumph instead of anger. "Thank God! I was afraid our family's bloodline would end with Corbin." Harper's lips trembled, but she nodded. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and Celine gathered her into an embrace as if they were long-lost kin. "You're carrying our future," Celine whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I stood frozen, my body refusing to move, though everything inside me screamed. Corbin lay unconscious in a room just steps away, and here was his mother welcoming the woman who had replaced me. Behind Celine, Magnus appeared. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders bent with the weight of years spent in her shadow. His eyes flicked to me briefly, full of something like apology, but he said nothing. Instead, he placed a hand on Celine's arm, a gesture of quiet support. No one looked at me. Not once. It was as though I were a ghost standing at the edge of my own life, watching roles being reassigned without consent. Wife was no longer my title. Harper had claimed it, and Celine had confirmed it. My place in this family had been erased in a single moment. The nurse called for immediate family to enter. Celine tightened her hold on Harper's arm and guided her forward, Magnus trailing behind. I remained in the hallway, my hands trembling at my sides. Through the glass, I saw Corbin's pale face surrounded by wires and machines. My reflection hovered in the pane like a stranger, blurred and fading. 2 days later, he was gone. Corbin never opened his eyes again. 2 days after the collapse, the machines in his room fell silent, and the monitors stilled. I sat at his bedside, watching the rise and fall of his chest slow until it stopped altogether. There were no final words, no chance for explanations, no acknowledgement of the years we had shared, only the sharp cry of a flatline and the sudden weight of absence. The following days blurred into condolence calls, paperwork, and hushed arrangements. I moved through it on autopilot, numb but raw. The funeral home smelled faintly of lilies and old wood, the air heavy with rehearsed sympathy. I wanted to disappear, but Celine would not allow it. She dominated the planning table as if it were her rightful throne, her pearls gleaming under the dim light of the director's office. "She must be included," Celine said firmly, her eyes locking on mine. Harper belongs at the service. She carries Corbin's child. She carries our legacy. The words sliced through me, though her tone was clinical, like she was ordering flowers or choosing hymns. Magnus sat beside her, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He finally spoke, his voice low but steady. It's about respect. Isolde. The Whitcomb name must be honored. Tradition demands it. I turned to him, searching for even a flicker of compassion, but he looked away, as though my grief was too inconvenient to meet. The funeral director glanced between us, his pen hovering, clearly uncomfortable. I realized then that no one would come to my defense. My role as wife had already been erased. My signature was needed, but my voice was not. I don't agree. I managed, my throat raw, but Celine cut me off with a lift of her hand. You'll do what's proper, she said. What this family requires. The fury rose inside me, scorching hotter than the grief. Yet I swallowed it down, the taste bitter and metallic. To resist would only give Celine another chance to call me unworthy. To fight here, in this office, would not bring back the dignity I had already lost. So I nodded once, though my hands curled into fists in my lap. They mistook my silence for surrender, but inside, something shifted. The woman they had pushed to the edges of her own marriage was not gone. She was waiting, and when Celine insisted Harper sit in the front row, I no longer heard defeat. I heard the spark of something sharper. The final arrangements were made in the family parlor of the Whitcomb house. The same room lined with portraits of ancestors who stared down with cold, painted eyes. Celine sat at the head of the table, her voice clipped and decisive. Harper will sit with us, she declared, as though she were announcing the order of service itself. Front row, beside family. I lifted my head, meeting her gaze. She is not family. Celine's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. She carries Corbin's child. That makes her more family than you ever managed to be. The words landed like a slap, and for a moment, the room spun. I steadied myself, willing my voice not to shake. This is my husband's funeral. My place is beside him, not hers. Before I could continue, Magnus cleared his throat. His expression was tired, but his tone carried the weight of command. Isolde, this isn't about personal feelings. It's about appearances. People will be watching. They'll expect us to act with grace. Let her sit with us for dignity's sake. Dignity. The word rang hollow. What dignity remained in being forced to share my grief with the woman who had mocked my marriage in secret, yet in that parlor, surrounded by the Whitcomb legacy? I realized there was no room for my voice. They had already decided. I pressed my hands together, my knuckles white, and gave a small nod. Outwardly, it looked like compliance. Inwardly, it was something else entirely. I would not fight them here. I would not give Celine the satisfaction of seeing me beg or break. If Harper was to sit in the front row, let the whispers begin. Let the glances fall like daggers. I would endure it, because my silence was not surrender. It was a storm gathering, biding its time. The service arrived too quickly, the chapel filled with flowers and whispers. And then Harper walked in, dressed like a queen in mourning. The chapel was heavy with flowers, their fragrance cloying, masking the salt of my tears. Corbin's casket rested at the front, draped in white lilies, the minister's voice droning over scripture that floated past me without meaning. I kept my head lifted, my back straight, as the mourners filled the pews, whispers rustling through the vaulted space. Then Harper appeared. She swept in as though she were the widow herself, pearls glistening at her throat. Her black dress fitted to perfection, her hair arranged in soft waves that caught the light. On her arm hung that same designer bag I had once found listed on a receipt. and she wore grief-like theater, each tremble of her lip calculated for an audience. Celine rose at once, her hand firm around Harper's elbow. "This is Harper," she announced proudly, loud enough for all to hear. "She is carrying our grandchild. She belongs with us." Gasps rippled through the pews, heads turned, eyes darted to me. I felt the weight of every glance, every murmur. Still, I stood at the casket, my palms pressed flat against the polished wood, forcing myself not to flinch. The service passed in fragments, and soon we were in the reception hall beside the chapel. Crystal glasses clinked, voices lowered into uneasy conversations. I tried to endure the condolences, nodding mechanically, until Harper's voice rose behind me. "She deserved it," she said, laughter in her tone. 8 years and nothing. No children, no spark. She was just a placeholder. The words sliced clean through the room. I turned slowly. Harper stood with 2 women I didn't know, tossing her hair, smirking. Celine appeared beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You had 8 years. Isolde," she said to me, her voice carrying, "and nothing to show for it. Maybe Corbin just needed a real woman." The glass in someone's hand shattered to the floor. The hall erupted in whispers, sharp and stinging, like hornets circling prey. My knees weakened, my chest burned, and still I stood there, silent in my shame. And then a voice I knew better than my own cut through the noise. The room vibrated with whispers, my humiliation thick in the air. Harper's smirk lingered, Celine's hand still firm on her shoulder. I felt cornered, stripped of everything but the shallow breath I managed to draw. Then came a voice low, steady, unmistakable. "It's time someone told the truth about Harper Vale." The words cut through the noise like a blade. Conversations died mid-syllable. Glasses froze halfway to lips. The room turned as one. And there he stood in the doorway. My father, Silas Rennick, at 62. His hair had silvered, his back a little bent, but the authority he once carried as a Charleston detective had never left him. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp, and the weight of his presence was enough to still even Celine. Harper stiffened, the color draining from her face. She straightened her shoulders, but her trembling hands betrayed her composure. My father stepped forward, each movement deliberate, his gaze locked on Harper. "I knew I recognized you," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Took a call this morning that confirmed it." Celine's hand slipped from Harper's arm. Magnus shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between them. The silence grew heavier, pressing against the walls, as though the city itself held its breath. Harper opened her mouth, then shut it again, her lips working soundlessly. For the first time, her performance cracked. My father stopped a few feet from her, his presence filling the space where my dignity had been stripped away minutes earlier. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His words carried like a verdict delivered in open court. This woman isn't who she claims to be. Every gaze in the room fixed on him, and for the first time that day, the shame no longer belonged to me. The truth was finally at the door, and it was about to step inside. My father's eyes never left Harper as the silence thickened around us. Then, with the steadiness of a man who had built a career on exposing half-truths, he spoke. "Her name isn't Harper Vale. Not legally. She's still married to Thomas Jameson, a veteran, a man who lives right here in West Ashley." Gasps rippled through the room. Harper's face went chalk white. She shook her head quickly, words tumbling out. "That's not true. We're separated. It's complicated." But the back doors of the hall opened, and a tall man in a leather jacket strode in. His presence silenced the room all over again. "TJ," my father said simply. The man's jaw was hard, his steps direct as he reached the table at the front. He dropped a folder onto the polished wood, papers spilling out. "Financial records," he said. "My bank account. Drained. Divorce papers she never filed. And this." He held up a small recorder. Pressing play. Her voice filled the room, grainy but unmistakable. "I faked the pregnancy. The Whitcombs are loaded. Once he's gone, they'll believe anything I tell them." The sound of it was unbearable. Celine staggered back, her hand clutching at a chair for balance. Magnus closed his eyes, his face a mask of shame. Harper's composure shattered. She lunged for the papers, her words breaking into panicked sobs. "You don't understand. He was leaving her. He loved me." But no one moved to help. The crowd stepped away as though her lies were contagious. She turned, eyes wild, and bolted for the door, her heels striking the tile in frantic staccato. The last glimpse I had of her was a blur of silk and desperation before the doors slammed shut behind her. The room exhaled, the whispers swelling into disbelief, and in the wreckage of truth, silence finally settled over the Whitcombs. The hall emptied slowly, guests slipping away in uneasy silence, leaving only the Whitcombs and me among the scattered chairs and wilting flowers. Celine sat rigid, her pearls askew, staring at nothing. Magnus approached me, his steps heavy, his voice lower than I had ever heard it. "I'm sorry, Isolde," he said, his hand hovering as though unsure if he had the right to touch my shoulder. "You didn't deserve any of this." I nodded once, unable to summon words. For the first time, his eyes held something other than distance. They held shame. Celine finally looked at me, her voice trembling. I was wrong. 3 words. No explanation. No plea for forgiveness. Just an admission so quiet it barely reached me. Then she turned away. The weeks that followed moved in unfamiliar quiet. The phone stopped buzzing with Celine's intrusions. The house no longer carried Corbin's scent, and I let myself breathe again. I returned to work, to the rhythm of numbers and order, to mornings where the only sound was the gulls over the harbor. But life still had one more turn waiting. I couldn't keep down my coffee one morning, the bitterness turning my stomach in ways I couldn't ignore. A test at the pharmacy confirmed it with 2 lines sharp as ink strokes. My doctor's calm smile sealed it. I was pregnant. I sat in the car afterward, hand pressed to my stomach, staring out at Charleston's cobblestones bathed in sunlight. Corbin had left me with betrayal, with silence, with emptiness. Yet, within me, there was something new, something untainted by him or his family's demands. For the first time in years, the legacy I carried was mine alone.